pretty quickly, the Republican nomination process is going to be wrapped up. And candidates who are underperforming right now or who don't see a path to victory, they've got one job, and that is, how do I best leverage all of the money that I've spent and all of the popularity that I still have to help our country and, frankly, to help my own future political ambitions. Because everybody else in this race, other than Asa Hutchinson, is pretty young and probably has some future political opportunities ahead of them. And you don't want to go out in an ugly way. You don't want to go out in a way that precludes you from having any kind of political future. That's just the reality. And Ron DeSantis, I assure you, is making that calculation right now. But last night, the major narrative from Team DeSantis was that he got robbed. Spencer Brown over at Town Hall has the story, and you see from the headline, DeSantis camp is crying election interference after Iowa was called for Trump. Now, what does he mean by that? Well, real quickly, we'll go through the article in a moment, but let me give you a quick example of what the DeSantis team is calling election interference. Here's Fox News.
So based on the first results and our Fox News voter analysis, the Fox News decision desk can now project that former President Donald Trump will win the Iowa caucuses.
CNN projects that Donald Trump will win the Iowa caucuses.
NBC News can now project at this hour that former President Donald J. Trump will be the projected winner.
Now, here's the problem. There's nothing wrong with the cable networks projecting their winner. They usually do that, right? That's what we're used to. A lot of people were joking last night that Fox also called Arizona for Biden while they were at it. It's a joke. Everybody chill out. The problem with those calls that you just saw is that they all happened around, well, you can see right there, 6:30 Mountain Time. That's 8:30 Eastern. That's 7:30 Iowa time, Central Time. What's wrong with that, right? Didn't the polls close at 7 o'clock, right? No, they didn't. This was not like your typical election night. This was a caucus process. Caucuses don't really have a firm ending to the process like your typical election night when the polls close. You see, there are no polls per se. There's no election machines or voting machines in these situations. What happens is at a caucus, everybody shows up at their local community center, their church, their school, wherever they're participating in the local district, wherever they're having the caucus. Everybody stands up, people give speeches about the candidate that they're supporting, and then everybody votes. Oh, and by the way, Byron York, who's there on the ground in Iowa, he reported exactly how the voting process takes place. Check this out. A ballot is blank 2x4 slip of paper. You write your candidate's name. You put it in a basket, and then they count them in front of everyone. No machines, no mail-in, no early voting, no nothing. Just write the name in your own handwriting, and then they count. How refreshing. How legal. And the fact that it's all counted. You put them all in the basket, and then that very basket is counted in front of everyone who's in the room. So there's no question. There's no doubts. There's no shenanigans. It's a nice process. The problem with the networks calling the race last night for Donald Trump at 7:30 Iowa time is that process was still going on. In fact, in some districts, they hadn't even voted yet. People were still giving their speeches for their candidates. And suddenly, because we live in the world of smartphones and news alerts, while people were in the process of voting or while they were getting ready to vote in the Iowa caucuses, their smartphones started dinging and saying, CNN just called the Iowa caucus for Donald Trump. Fox News just called the Iowa caucus for Donald Trump. In fact, you probably had a situation in many of these caucus meetings where the person who was about to give a speech for their candidate, Donald Trump, said in the middle of their speech, by the way, Trump just won Iowa, so you might as well just vote for him. And that brings us to Spencer Brown's article about the DeSantis team calling foul here. Campaign aides and allies of Florida Governor Ron DeSantis are none too pleased that Iowa was called for Trump within about 30 minutes on Monday evening, crying foul and alleging election interference. Aaron Romeo, the tweet here, he works for the for the DeSantis campaign, said absolutely outrageous that the media would participate in election interference by calling the race before tens of thousands of Iowans even had a chance to vote. The media is in the tank for Trump, and this is the most egregious example yet. In Iowa's process, all locations are to begin conducting the caucus at 7 p.m. local time, but the differing turnouts at each caucus site, along with varying amounts of business to handle and candidate pitches to hear before voting begins, means that not every location begins and finishes voting at the same time. On Monday night, that meant Trump's substantial early lead caused the call for Trump before some locations had even begun voting. Jeremy Redfern said, I'm at a precinct that hasn't voted yet, and the media, you can see, he edited this at 8:53, are calling the race for Trump. While it wouldn't have been as much of an issue in earlier years, the always connected reality of 2024 means that most caucus goers likely saw the news as soon as the race was called via a post on X or a push alert from a news outlet, whether they'd cast a ballot yet or not. Former White House Press Secretary Sean Spicer criticized the early call. The media calling the caucuses 30 minutes after the start is highly irresponsible. Yeah, Sean's right about this, I got to say. Now, in a so far at least neck-and-neck fight for second place as votes are tallied, DeSantis and former Ambassador Nikki Haley are each looking for a strong runner-up finish to Trump as they look forward toward primaries in New Hampshire later this month and South Carolina toward the end of February. That, of course, Spencer Brown wrote that as the evening was still developing. But that is an issue. It is 100% an issue, and Spencer is right to point it out there. And the DeSantis team, listen, they're right to call foul, but when the headline comes out and they're saying, we got robbed, it was election interference, come on, guys. You weren't going to win, okay? The question is, how close was it going to be? And would you be able to claim coming out of Iowa that you've got a legit chance to beat Donald Trump? You may be able to make that case, saying, listen, his lead and the victory was larger than it would have been had they not called it early, which is a legitimate case to make. And it's frankly the only case that Team DeSantis can make. That said, Ron DeSantis did give a speech that you could argue smacked of a bit of a victory, considering what he faced in Iowa and the money that was spent against him. And it was a pretty rough campaign, certainly between Trump and DeSantis. And here he was giving his somewhat victory speech.
We love you too. They threw everything but the kitchen sink at us. They spent almost $50 million attacking us. No one's faced that much all the way just through Iowa. The media was against us. They were writing our obituary months ago. They even called the election before people even got a chance to vote.
There you go. Now, I see this and I'm struggling. Listen, and his whole point yesterday was to deliver the message that, listen, we're leaving Iowa with our ticket punched, to use that language. That's the old media language. They would say, who got their ticket punched out of Iowa? If you ride the trains back in the day, they used to punch your ticket. The language that we use in American politics is so archaic, isn't it? He got his ticket punched. Absolutely. He's in second place. And from the language of his speech last night, he's heading straight to South Carolina. He's not putting a whole lot of money and interest into New Hampshire, which is a strategy, and it's valid. We'll see what happens if it works for him, because the message coming out of New Hampshire is definitely going to be all about Nikki Haley and how well she does or doesn't do against Trump. But let me say, I'm looking at this image. Look at that image right there. Look at Ron DeSantis standing in front of a beautiful backdrop of the American flag with this podium and the text freedom number there for donations and all that stuff. And it strikes me when I look at it that Ron DeSantis had so much money and so much potential and so much obvious positive goodwill coming out of his job as governor of Florida, and certainly absolutely demolishing his opponents in Florida for re-election in 2022. He had so much potential going into his campaign when he launched it last year. And one wonders, because there are going to be books written about the DeSantis campaign in 2024, I promise you. And sadly, most of those books are going to be about what not to do. And I think for a moment, and I wonder, imagine if Ron DeSantis had announced his campaign in this fashion, traditionally, with a great stage and great lighting and a great backdrop and all of the typical stuff that you would normally do. Do you remember how he launched his campaign? It was on a Twitter Spaces. I think we were still calling it Twitter back then. A Twitter Spaces with Elon Musk and and I forget who it was with him, but it was like a businessman, right? Kevin, do you remember who it was that joined them on that Twitter Spaces? It was audio only. There was no video. And the site
Sachs
crashed.
was his last name?
Wasn't it Sachs?
Sachs. Yeah, I can't remember his first name.
But see, this is the problem. This is the problem. We can't even remember who the third voice was. We couldn't even see it because it was audio only. And it was some guy who was like a venture capitalist businessman who joined Elon Musk for some stupid reason so that Elon Musk could interview Ron DeSantis. But really, the big message coming out of that was not about Ron DeSantis's campaign. It was about the fact that the site crashed multiple times and it didn't work. And that Elon Musk did most of the talking because it was about Twitter and about Elon Musk and not about Ron DeSantis. And even more importantly, not about us, the voters. And listen, I don't want to dance on the grave here because I don't have a dog in this race. Horse in this fight. You know what I mean. I'm commenting on this and observing as a Republican voter and as a person in the media, and one wonders if he had done more of a traditional launch, if the narrative would have been different. But, you know, Ron DeSantis was advised by people about how to utilize new media and leverage new media and use Twitter, then X, as part of the playing field here for this campaign. And I don't think it worked. In fact, I know for a fact it didn't work. And sadly, much of the vitriol and ugliness and infighting and backbiting and really ugly campaigning between Ron DeSantis and Donald Trump didn't actually happen between Ron DeSantis and Donald Trump. It happened between people that worked for them in social media going real vicious against each other. And it got so vicious that I don't know if these two can figure it out. I don't know if we can get to a point where Ron DeSantis endorses Donald Trump and it actually means something and helps the ticket, helps the party, and helps the country. But I got to tell you something. A Trump DeSantis ticket would be unstoppable. Absolutely 100% unstoppable and unbeatable in November. But sadly, right now, a Trump DeSantis ticket is unthinkable because it got so ugly, because it got so nasty, because the wrong people were advising both of these candidates about how to go about their political attacks on social media. But as I just said about Vivek Ramaswamy, utilizing his political leverage at its height, at its pinnacle, to support Donald Trump, that's where this guy is right now. Ron DeSantis will never have as much political clout and leverage as he has at this very moment. And coming in second place, defeating Nikki Haley, which really is the headline coming out of last night, other than Trump's win and Trump getting over 50%. It's not that Ron DeSantis came in second. It's that Nikki Haley didn't. Because everything we've been hearing in the media for the last 2 weeks is, watch out, Nikki Haley's going to shock the world in Iowa. And it didn't happen. The headline is Ron DeSantis defeated Nikki Haley. And guess who needs that more than anything else right now? Donald Trump. Donald Trump needs Ron DeSantis's support, needs Ron DeSantis's endorsement, and needs Ron DeSantis's voters going into New Hampshire. And here's the really weird thing. Set aside Trump and DeSantis themselves for a minute and set aside all of the campaign advisors and people who are paid to be on social media to insult each other on behalf of DeSantis and Trump. I want to talk for a quick second about Trump voters and DeSantis voters. Remember us? Remember the voters? The reality is the vast majority of Trump voters like Ron DeSantis. They don't have a beef with him. The vast majority of DeSantis voters like Trump. They just this time liked DeSantis better, whether it's because of the age thing or the criminal trials or January 6th, or maybe they just think that DeSantis was more effective as a governor. They liked Trump 4 years ago. They liked Trump 8 years ago. And this time around, they wanted to give DeSantis a chance. They don't hate Trump, and Trump voters don't hate DeSantis. That's why this is the ticket that would actually unite the party. Way more than a Trump-Haley ticket would, which is what they're talking about for some stupid reason. If Ron DeSantis could figure out a way at this moment, like within the next 48 hours, to utilize that leverage he has and throw it to Donald Trump, that could basically end this entire process before it really gets started. And then all the tens and tens and tens of even hundreds of millions of dollars that has been raised and spent on this Republican nomination process can then be coalesced and utilized to defeat Joe Biden and the destructive policies that he's implemented on this country. That would actually be incredible. I just don't think it's possible, sadly. If only it was possible.